Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, checking your phone, and reading a headline that says the United States government now owns 50% of the biggest artificial intelligence companies in the world.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a shock.
Right. Half the voting stock of the most powerful tech conglomerates just suddenly public property? I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds like the plot of a sci-fi novel, or maybe, I don't know, a massive historical shift you'd read about in an alternate history textbook.
Yeah, it really does.
But that exact proposal was literally just introduced on the floor of the United States Senate.
It is a totally staggering concept. And honestly, it completely shatters the illusion that lawmakers are, only bickering over incremental, tiny policy shifts.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing a special feature we call Congress in Context, where we actually examine the real legislative machinery of the United States.
Right, getting under the hood.
Yeah. Our mission here is to just cut entirely through the partisan noise, the sound bites, and the whole social media outreach cycle. We want to help you understand what actually happened in Congress in late June of 2026.
Because it's a lot, frankly.
It is. So we're looking directly at the primary source material today, the congressional record from June 22nd, alongside the actual text of newly introduced and debated bills. We're just pulling out the most critical insights so you can see what your representatives are doing when the cameras aren't focused on them.
Right, and before we really get into the weeds, just a really brief housekeeping note. This project is a completely independent, ad-free civic education resource.
Yes, very important to mention.
Yeah, so if you find value in understanding how these massive policies actually work, under the hood,
Yeah.
you can help keep our production infrastructure sustainable. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link located directly in your app's show notes.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are looking at a bizarre, massive bipartisan win on the housing crisis.
Which is rare in itself.
Super rare. We're also going to look at a severe constitutional tug of war over war powers and a peace deal in the Middle East. And we are going to explore that radical artificial intelligence proposal I mentioned off the top. It is a packed docket.
It really is. And we're looking at the mechanics of these bills, right? The what and the why. And just to be totally clear up front, we're remaining entirely objective here.
Always.
Yeah. Whether we are breaking down a left-wing sovereign wealth fund or a right-wing critique of a Middle East peace deal, we are not endorsing these viewpoints. We're basically just holding up a mirror to the source material so you can actually hear the arguments your lawmakers are making.
Right, exactly. And I think the best place to start is with something that touches, honestly, literally every community in the country, which is the housing market.
Oh, absolutely. Specifically, we need to talk about the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, which is H.R. 6644.
Right. And the Senate passed this bill with an overwhelming 85-5 vote.
Which is wild.
It's completely wild. I mean, in the hyper-polarized climate of 2026, getting 85 senators to agree on what to order for lunch feels impossible, let alone passing sweeping domestic policies.
Exactly. To get that kind of supermajority, the problem basically has to be so painful, so unavoidable, that ideology just has to take a back seat to sheer necessity.
Yeah, and Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts really laid out the mathematics of that pain during her floor speech.
She did. She pointed out that back in 1990, the average home price in the United States was around $150,000.
Right.
And today, 36 years later, that average has skyrocketed past $500,000.
Which is just staggering. And she also noted the median age for a first-time homebuyers had an all-time high of 40 years old.
40 years old. Yeah.
I mean, think about the macroeconomic shockwaves of that single statistic. If you aren't buying a house until you are 40, you are significantly delaying wealth accumulation. You're likely delaying having children, which impacts birth rates and, future tax bases.
Wow.
You're entering your peak earning years still burdened by entirely unpredictable rent increases. It fundamentally rewrites the American economic life cycle.
It does. And Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina actually echoed that exact urgency. But he approached the mechanics of the solution from a completely different angle.
Right. What was his take?
Well, he spoke about growing up in poverty in a single-parent household in North Charleston. And he argued the core issue isn't just a lack of federal subsidies, but a tangled web of red tape that's basically preventing supply from meeting demand.
Right, the supply issue. And this is where we really need to look at the actual mechanisms of the bill. Like, how do you legally untangle that red tape from the federal level?
Well, Senator Scott specifically highlighted a provision one he noted was actually championed by President Trump that's designed to stop private equity firms from buying up single-family homes.
Oh, right. And Warren actually agreed with this point, which is a rare crossover. But mechanically speaking, how does Wall Street functionally buy up an entire neighborhood?
Well, honestly, it comes down to liquidity and algorithms.
Mm,
Institutional investors just have access to massive pools of capital,
right.
and they use proprietary software to scan local real estate listings the absolute second they go live.
Which a normal family just can't compete with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when a family lists a starter home, a traditional buyer needs a 30-day escrow, right? They need mortgage pre-approval, a home inspection contingency.
Yeah, the usual hoops.
But a private equity firm bypasses all of that.
Mm.
They drop an all-cash offer, sometimes even above asking price, with zero contingencies, literally within hours of the listing.
And the seller obviously takes the fast cash.
Of course they do. And then the firm converts that single-family home into a permanent rental property.
So they're essentially bottlenecking the supply of starter homes.
Exactly.
So Congress is stepping in here to say that single-family residential zoning should be for human beings building equity, not for, corporate portfolios looking for rental yields.
Right. And Senator Scott used a phenomenal throwback analogy for this on the floor. He said, like E.F. Hutton, when the American people speak, Congress needs to listen.
That's a great line, but the legislation goes beyond just restricting corporate buyers, right?
It does. It also mandates that the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, has to streamline their environmental review process.
Wait, I want to pause on that, because environmental reviews are notorious for stalling construction. We are talking about the National Environmental Policy Act here, right? NEPA.
Yes, exactly, Nika.
So how does this bill actually bypass that without just gutting environmental protections entirely?
It's clever. The bill introduces a categorization called exempt activities and relies on something called structural primers.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
So under previous regulations, if a city wanted to use HUD funds to redevelop, say, an abandoned commercial lot into affordable housing, they often had to undergo a massive, comprehensive environmental impact assessment.
Which means hiring consultants, studying soil disruption.
Traffic patterns, water runoff, all of it. Yeah. It can take years and cost millions before a single shovel even hits the dirt.
Wow.
But this bill allows HUD to say, look, if you are building on a site that has already been developed and primed structurally in the past, you don't need to do a 5-year study on the environmental impact of building an apartment where an old strip mall used to be.
Ah, I see. So it legally lowers the barrier to entry for the actual builders.
Precisely.
And Senator John Kennedy also tied a mechanism into this bill that creates a sort of carrot and stick approach for local municipalities, right?
He did. It actively rewards communities that reform their zoning to build more housing with federal financial incentives while actually pulling federal money away from towns that refuse to build.
So it's basically a federal mandate to force local action?
Pretty much. The federal government is essentially saying, we will subsidize the construction of the roof, but you legally have to allow the roof to be built in your backyard.
Right. Okay. That actually brings me to the 5 senators who voted against this. You have this massive 85-vote consensus, but Senators Johnson, Lee, Paul, Scott of Florida, and Tuberville all voted nay.
Yeah, they did.
If this bill cuts red tape and increases housing supply, what is their philosophical objection?
The objection is really rooted in federalism and free market purity.
Okay.
Even though the bill's goal is deregulation, it uses the immense leverage of federal funding to dictate local zoning behavior.
Right, the carrot and stick.
Exactly. For a staunch libertarian or fiscal conservative, local zoning should remain strictly local. The moment the federal government steps in to penalize a town for its zoning laws, or dictates who can and cannot buy real estate in a free market, even if that buyer is a massive private equity firm, it crosses a line into federal overreach.
Ah, so they view it as a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, where the federal government basically becomes the ultimate zoning board for the entire country.
So they see the housing crisis, but they fundamentally reject the idea that Washington, D.C. should be holding the hammer to fix it.
Precisely. For those 5 lawmakers, the method matters just as much as the outcome.
Well, that tension over the limits of federal power transitions us perfectly away from domestic unity and straight into an absolute constitutional pressure cooker regarding foreign policy.
Oh, yes. The Iran resolution.
Yeah, we are looking at H. Con Res.
Yeah.
86. This is a concurrent resolution in the House directing the president to remove U.S. armed forces from hostilities with Iran.
And this is where we really see the legislative branch actively trying to reel in the executive branch. The resolution explicitly invokes the War Powers Resolution of 1973.
Right. The post-Vietnam guardrails.
Exactly. It demands full compliance with the requirement that the president must secure explicit congressional authorization, so either a declaration of war or a specific statutory authorization before using military force.
With the only exception being an imminent attack on the U.S. or its allies, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's set the stage for why this is happening right now. The backdrop is Operation Epic Fury. The U.S. military engaged in an escalation of hostilities with Iran. And following that, President Trump signed a memorandum of understanding, a letter of intent, basically to end those hostilities and forge a new deal with the Iranian regime.
And the debate on the Senate floor over this executive action was just blistering.
I bet.
Yeah. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa took to the floor to vigorously defend the administration's preliminary military strikes that led up to this deal.
What was his main argument?
He argued that the U.S. systematically dismantled Iran's nuclear infrastructure and their military arsenals. But more importantly, he brought macroeconomic receipts to prove that the Iranian regime was forced to the negotiating table out of sheer desperation.
And the numbers he quoted are almost hard to comprehend.
They really are.
I mean, he cited that inflation in Iran has hit 77%, the cost of basic goods is up 400% in a single year, and the Iranian currency, the rial, hit a record low of 1.8 million to $1. Wait, how does an economy even function at 1.8 million to 1? Are people carrying wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread?
Well, in functional terms, an economy under that level of hyperinflation basically resorts to a shadow system. Citizens just abandon the local currency entirely for major transactions.
Makes sense.
Yeah, wealth is rapidly converted into tangible assets, so gold, foreign real estate, or black market U.S. dollars. The government basically loses its ability to finance its operations through standard monetary policy because printing more money only accelerates the collapse.
Right. It's a death spiral.
Exactly. So Grassley's core argument is that this catastrophic economic pressure, combined with the military strikes, effectively broke the regime's capacity to project power, which created an opening for a highly favorable peace deal.
But he also warned about trusting them.
Oh, absolutely. He stressed that because the regime is backed into a corner, they are incredibly dangerous and prone to deception. So he's demanding strict, unyielding verification of any promises they make.
But then you have the left-wing perspective on this exact same deal, and it is completely inverted.
Totally night and day.
Yeah, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York tore into the agreement, famously dubbing it the art of the faceplant.
Wow.
Yeah, he argued that the Memorandum of Understanding is incredibly vague and effectively hands Iran a massive wish list of concession.
Right, and Schumer specifically targeted a proposed $300 billion reconstruction fund. He questioned the unspecified sources of that funding, basically implying the U.S. taxpayer or allied nations would be footing the bill to rebuild a hostile nation's infrastructure.
Which is a tough sell politically.
Very. And he also pointed out that the deal seemingly allows Iran to maintain a strategic stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, I have to ask, why is the Strait of Hormuz always the focal point of these debates? Like, for an everyday listener, why does a narrow waterway halfway across the world dictate Senate floor speeches?
That's a great question. It's because roughly 20% of the world's total oil consumption passes through that specific 39-mile wide choke point.
20%.
Yes. If Iran maintains the military capability to mine that strait, or even just harass commercial tankers with fast attack boats, they can spike the global price of crude oil literally overnight. And that directly translates to skyrocketing prices for gasoline and diesel at the pump in the United States, which in turn drives up the cost of every single consumer good transported by truck.
So Schumer's argument is that any peace deal that leaves Iran with their hands around the neck of the global energy supply chain is just a strategic failure.
Exactly.
And this is where the parliamentary history gets wild. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois stood up and added this layer of historical irony that, I mean, you couldn't write into a movie script.
No, you really couldn't.
He reminded the chamber of a famous letter sent back in 2015, drafted by Republican Senator Tom Cotton and signed by 47 Republican senators.
Right, the 2015 letter, that was an open warning directed at the Ayatollah of Iran during the Obama administration. The Republicans warned the Iranian leadership that the nuclear agreement President Obama was negotiating was merely an executive agreement, not a ratified treaty.
Which is a huge
A
distinction.
massive one. They explicitly stated that the next U.S. president could revoke it with the stroke of a pen.
Which President Trump subsequently did during his first term. He withdrew from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Exactly.
So Durbin is taking that exact logic from 2015 and throwing it right back at the current administration. He is arguing that you cannot bypass the legislative branch just because your party happens to hold the keys to the White House.
Right. And this brings us to the procedural weapon Durbin is wielding here, which is INARA.
The Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act. Let's dive deep into INARA. What is the actual mechanism here?
So INARA was passed roughly a decade ago with massive bipartisan support, precisely because Congress felt sidelined by the executive branch's foreign policy.
Okay.
The law dictates that any nuclear agreement reached with Iran must be submitted to Congress within 5 days.
Just 5 days.
Right. And once submitted, it triggers a mandatory 30-day review period. During that window, Congress can hold hearings and force a privileged vote of approval or disapproval.
And a privileged vote means what exactly?
It means it bypasses the standard committee delays and the filibuster in the Senate. It goes straight to the floor.
Wow.
Yeah. So Durbin is arguing that this 14-point memorandum of understanding signed by President Trump legally triggers INARA. Therefore, the president cannot lift a single sanction or authorize a single dollar for a reconstruction fund until Congress gets its 30 days to scrutinize the deal.
We are literally watching a live-action constitutional stress test.
We really are.
I mean, the House is using the 1973 War Powers Resolution to try and pull troops out of hostilities, and the Senate is using a decade-old oversight law to demand a veto over the peace deal. It shows that Congress has an institutional memory.
Yes, definitely.
The tools one party builds to constrain an opposing president are just left in the toolbox, waiting to be picked up by the other side years later.
It's the defining struggle of the American Republic, right? The executive branch naturally seeks decentralized power to act quickly in global crises, while the legislative branch continuously throws legal nets over the executive to force deliberation and shared responsibility.
It's fascinating, but we just saw how hard it is for Congress to assert control over a decades-old geopolitical conflict using laws written in the 1970s.
Right.
But what happens when they try to put guardrails on a technology that fundamentally alters reality every 30 days?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that brings us to the massive stack of artificial intelligence legislation introduced this week.
If the housing bill was about untangling 30 years of bad policy, the AI bills are basically a desperate attempt to prevent a 30-day-old algorithmic breakthrough from becoming a permanent economic and social catastrophe.
That is a great way to put it. The scope of these bills is vast, so let's categorize them by the mechanisms they're trying to employ.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's start with education and standardization. We have the LIFT AI Act, H.R. 5884, aimed at integrating AI literacy into K-12 education, alongside bills establishing training programs for educators.
Right. Congress is recognizing that AI isn't just a tool anymore. It's a new foundational literacy, kind of like mathematics or reading.
Exactly. But the standardization bills are where the technical mandates get really fascinating. There is the Read AI Models Act, H.R. 6461, which directs NIST to create documentation templates for AI models.
So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They are the agency responsible for ensuring that the structural steel in a skyscraper meets safety requirements, or that a gallon of gas at the pump is actually a mathematically precise gallon.
Right, they do the hard measurements.
Exactly. And Congress is now tasking them with treating generative AI models like structural engineering.
The bill demands highly specific disclosures, including the geographic location of the developers and, crucially, the knowledge cutoff dates for the training data.
Yes.
Wait, why is a knowledge cutoff date a matter of federal legislation?
Because context is literally everything with AI. An AI model does not know things in real time. It operates on a frozen snapshot of the internet.
Okay.
So if you are a doctor consulting an AI diagnostic tool or a lawyer using it for case precedent, you absolutely must know if its brain stopped ingesting new information in 2023 or 2026.
Oh, wow. Yeah, if the model doesn't know about a medical protocol updated last year, it could confidently generate lethal advice.
Exactly. It's a massive safety issue.
And Congress is also pushing H.R. 8893, the Protecting Consumers from Deceptive AI Act, which attempts to mandate digital fingerprinting and watermarking of generative audio, visual, and text outputs.
Right.
But how do you actually watermark text? I get how you can embed a hidden pixel code in an image, but text.
It relies on statistical probability and cryptographic hashing within the large language model's output.
Oh, okay, you have to break that down.
So when an AI generates a sentence, it is essentially predicting the next most likely word. A text watermark forces the AI to occasionally choose a slightly less probable word based on a hidden cryptographic key.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so to a human reader, the sentence reads perfectly naturally. But to a detection software holding the key, the specific pattern of those subtle word choices serves as a mathematical barcode proving a machine wrote it.
That is brilliant.
It is. Congress is really trying to strip away the anonymity of synthetic media before we entirely lose the ability to discern truth from, algorithmic hallucination.
That is incredible. But the category of AI legislation that physically shocked me was the infrastructure bills.
The energy demands.
Yes, we are moving away from the software and looking at the concrete and copper wire. A major bill, H.R. 9372, focuses on the staggering energy demands of AI data centers, specifically defining the difference between behind-the-meter generation and front-of-meter generation.
And this distinction is going to define local politics for the next decade.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Training a large language model requires orders of magnitude more electricity and water for cooling than a traditional cloud storage server. We were talking about facilities that consume the equivalent power of a small city.
Okay, let's break down those terms. What does front-of-meter mean for someone living near one of these proposed data centers?
Front of meter basically means the data center is plugging directly into the public utility grid. Drawing front-of-meter power for a massive AI server farm is like plugging a stadium's lighting rig into your living room wall outlet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the entire neighborhood's grid is going to flicker. It strains the transmission lines. It increases the risk of brownouts during peak summer hours.
And I imagine it affects the costs, too.
Massively. It forces the local utility company to buy expensive emergency power, which they then just pass on to the everyday consumer in the form of higher electric bills.
So if an AI company wants to build a facility, they should be behind the meter.
Exactly. Behind the meter means the tech company builds its own dedicated power source on-site. So perhaps a massive solar array with battery storage, or even a small modular nuclear reactor.
Wow, their own nuclear reactor.
Yeah, the point is they're generating the gigawatts they need without cannibalizing the public's electricity supply.
This physical footprint issue led directly to Senator Bernie Sanders taking the floor to demand a national moratorium on the construction of new AI data centers.
He did.
He cited polling showing that 63% of Americans across all political affiliations support pausing these massive server farms.
Because it is a profound local versus national tension. I mean, a citizen might love the convenience of using an AI assistant on their phone to draft emails, but they do not want a windowless, humming warehouse draining millions of gallons from their local reservoir for cooling, while simultaneously doubling their summer utility bills.
Right. And Sanders noted that over 50 local municipalities have already enacted their own emergency zoning moratoriums against data centers.
Yeah, the local pushback is real.
But Sanders didn't stop at physical infrastructure. He also introduced the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, and this goes back to the headline I mentioned at the very beginning of the show. This bill proposes that the American public own 50% of the voting stock of major AI companies.
It's just a huge swing.
It would create a $7 trillion fund designed to pay an annual 5% dividend directly to the American people.
I have to push back hard on this. Nationalizing 50% of private technology conglomerates.
I know, it sounds crazy.
We aren't a petrostate nationalizing unrefined oil reserves in the ground. How does a lawmaker even justify claiming public ownership over a private software company?
Well, the philosophical argument underpinning the bill is completely novel in American politics. The proponents argue that an artificial intelligence model is fundamentally different from a traditional software product.
How so?
An AI is not programmed from scratch. It is trained on the collective, scraped data of human history. Every digitized book, every copyrighted painting, every public forum post, every recorded conversation that exists on the internet was ingested without compensation to train these models.
Okay, I follow that.
Therefore, the argument goes, if AI is going to systematically automate away 30% of white-collar labor, the humanity that provided the raw material, the training data, is entitled to a permanent equity stake in the resulting automated economy. So they are viewing human data as a national natural resource, like the oil in Alaska that funds the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend.
That is the exact parallel they're drawing.
Yeah.
But realistically, the chances of the U.S. government successfully nationalizing half of Silicon Valley's voting stock in the current legal framework are virtually zero.
Yeah, I would assume so.
It would trigger the largest Fifth Amendment constitutional takings clause lawsuit in the history of jurisprudence.
Right. So if it is legally doomed, why introduce it? Is it just political theater?
Not exactly. It is a calculated legislative tactic designed to dramatically shift the Overton window.
Okay, remind everyone what that is.
The Overton window represents the spectrum of policies considered politically acceptable by the mainstream at any given time. If you want to eventually pass a modest 5% corporate tax on AI companies to fund worker retraining programs, you don't start by proposing a 5% tax.
Right, you start high.
You start by proposing a 50% total public ownership takeover. You anchor the negotiations so far to the extreme that when you eventually walk it back to a standard tax mechanism, or perhaps a localized data dividend framework, it suddenly appears incredibly reasonable and moderate to the tech industry.
You are forcing the market to price in the threat of aggressive wealth redistribution.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, we have spent a lot of time today in the macro stratosphere. We've looked at the foundational philosophy of housing markets, the brinksmanship of Middle East war powers, and the existential economics of artificial intelligence.
Some big stuff.
The huge stuff. But the congressional record isn't just sweeping geopolitical drama. It is also filled with the micro-legislation that quietly changes the reality of a Tuesday afternoon.
This is the engine room of governance. And frankly, this is the legislation that has the highest probability of directly impacting a listener's daily routine within the next 12 months.
Yeah, let's look at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Congress introduced H.R. 5992, practically titled the Stuck on Hold Act.
Great name.
Yeah, this bill legally requires the VA to implement an automated callback system if a veteran's wait time on the customer service line exceeds 10 minutes.
It sounds like a minor administrative tweak, but consider the human element here.
Right.
If you are an aging veteran dealing with chronic service-connected health issues, or you're attempting to navigate a complex, bureaucratic denial of benefits, being trapped on a phone line, listening to hold music for 2 hours is not just a mild annoyance.
Yeah, it's agonizing.
It is an active barrier to accessing federal health care. By legally mandating a callback architecture, Congress is forcing a massive bureaucracy to respect the physical time and dignity of the citizen.
We also saw bills ensuring a cost of living adjustment, a COLA for veterans with service-connected disabilities, directly tying their benefits to the inflation metrics used for Social Security. That's H.R. 8552.
Right, keeping them afloat.
And there is H.R. 6588, the Provide Act, to expedite disability claims for veterans impacted by major natural disasters. If a hurricane wipes out your coastal town, your pending VA claim automatically gets moved to the top of the processing queue.
Which is just common sense policy.
Yeah.
And there was also a deeply sobering initiative, H.R. 90006, the Locating Our Unclaimed Veterans Act, creating a centralized interagency portal between the VA, the FBI, and the Social Security Administration.
What's the goal of that one?
The sole purpose of this database is to identify the unclaimed remains of veterans across the country to ensure they receive a proper military burial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is a quiet administrative undertaking that really represents a profound moral obligation.
Absolutely. And we also saw micro-legislation aimed at the friction of travel and physical security. There is H.R. 8897, the Improving Travel for American Families Act.
Oh, parents are going to love this one.
Yes, it creates a pilot program at 5 major airports to establish alternative TSA security screening lanes exclusively for families traveling with children under the age of 12.
Anyone who has ever attempted to collapse a complex stroller, remove the shoes of a crying toddler, and manage a pile of carry-on luggage while a line of frustrated business travelers glares at them understands the absolute necessity of this bill.
It's miserable.
It is policy designed entirely around stress reduction. Separating the logistics of family travel from the high-speed commuter lanes improves the efficiency and the psychological experience for literally everyone in the terminal.
For sure. On a slightly more intense security note, we saw H.R. 3334 giving the United States Capitol Police the explicit legal authority to intercept, digitally hack, disrupt, and physically seize control of threatening unmanned aircraft systems, drones that violate the Capitol's airspace.
This is a perfect example of the law trying to catch up with off-the-shelf consumer technology.
Right, because drones are everywhere now.
A few $100s can buy a drone capable of carrying a payload over secure fencing. The Capitol Police needed the statutory authority to essentially hijack the radio frequencies of those devices without violating federal wiretapping or aviation interference laws.
I love looking at these microbills because it is a vital, grounding reality. When you watch the cable news networks, it feels like the country is constantly on the precipice of a civil war or a global meltdown.
Really does.
Yeah, the media focuses exclusively on the conflict over Iran or the terror of AI because fear and conflict drive algorithmic engagement. But beneath all that noise, the engine of the government is still churning.
Thankfully.
Right. There are staffers and lawmakers sitting in committee rooms quietly debating the software architecture of a VA phone system or the logistics of an airport security line.
That is the core value of reading the actual congressional record.
Yeah.
It cures the political nihilism that suggests the government is entirely broken and does nothing but argue.
Exactly.
The arguments are just the loudest part of a very large, very complex machine that is constantly performing maintenance on society.
Which brings us to the most important part of this entire discussion, which is how you, the listener, interact with this machine. Civic engagement does not end when you pause this audio.
Not at all. The barrier to interacting with the source material is lower than it has ever been in human history.
Tell them how to do it.
You can just open a browser and go to congress.gov. It is a brilliant, transparent, free public database. You can search for the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, H.R. 6644. You can read the exact text of the environmental review exemptions.
Which is pretty cool to see for yourself.
It is. You can search for your specific representative by your zip code and see exactly how they voted. Did they side with the supermajority on the housing bill, or were they one of the 5 dissenters arguing against federal zoning interference?
And your participation goes way beyond just casting a ballot every 2 years.
Absolutely. The housing bill we discussed is deeply intertwined with local zoning laws. The federal government is creating the incentives, but your local city council is the body that actually changes the zoning map.
So you can get involved locally?
Yes. You can attend a local zoning board meeting and advocate for the development of starter homes in your town. Furthermore, many of the AI bills, like the Red AI Models Act, mandate that federal agencies like NIST open up 60-day public comment periods when they draft these new watermarking templates.
Wait, can anyone submit a comment?
Yes, anyone. They are legally required to read submissions from the public. If you are a software engineer, a digital artist, or just a concerned citizen who understands how these algorithms are impacting your profession, you can go to regulations.gov and submit your expert opinion.
That is amazing.
You have a direct, legally protected voice in the bureaucratic rulemaking process before the final standards are cemented.
That is incredibly empowering. It takes the abstract concept of the government and turns it into a process you can actually touch.
Exactly.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over. We saw today how deliberately, and sometimes agonizingly slowly, Congress moves to pass a major piece of legislation like the housing bill.
Decades in the making.
Right. It took 36 years of compounding market pressure to build the consensus necessary to alter those zoning and environmental review mechanisms. But as we saw with the AI proposals, we are now entering an era where technology is advancing and mutating in months, not decades.
That's true. As
the hyperspeed of artificial intelligence inevitably collides with the slow, deliberate friction of our foreign policy and our domestic laws, will our slow-moving legislative process be the fatal flaw that prevents us from keeping up?
That's the big fear.
Or will that very friction be the only thing that saves us from rushing blindly into disaster?
It is the ultimate stress test of the system the founders designed centuries before the invention of the microchip.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the context of Congress. We are profoundly grateful to have an audience that values nuance, mechanics, and primary source material over sound bites.
We really are.
As a quick reminder to keep this independent resource sustainable and entirely ad-free, please consider clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link right there in the show description.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be an informed, curious citizen.
Until next time, keep asking how things work and keep reading the record.